To many people, an INFJ feels like a quiet room with the lights slightly dimmed. There's a sense of calm, but also a sense that something important is happening beneath the surface. When INFJs walk into a space, they rarely announce themselves. They don't dominate it. Instead, they seem to observe it, as if they're listening to a conversation no one else can hear. This alone unsettles some people. Humans are instinctively wary of those they can't immediately read, and INFJs are notoriously unreadable. People often feel seen by INFJs long before they feel known by them. An INFJ might not talk much, but when they do, their words land with precision. It can feel as though the INFJ has quietly mapped someone's inner world without asking permission. This creates a strange, emotional imbalance. Others feel exposed, while the INFJ remains private. Some find this comforting. Others find it deeply uncomfortable. To acquaintances, INFJs often appear polite, composed, even gentle. But there's an underlying seriousness that people can't quite explain. They don't come across as frivolous or easily distracted. Even when laughing, there's a sense that their mind is somewhere deeper, connecting dots, watching patterns form. This gives others the impression that INFJs are old souls, or that they carry a gravity beyond their years. People may not consciously think this, but they feel it. Close friends often describe INFJs as emotionally intelligent in a way that feels almost unnatural. INFJs remember small details, things others said months ago and forgot. This makes people feel valued, sometimes intensely so. Being listened to by an INFJ can feel like being taken seriously for the first time. Yet this same quality can make people nervous. There's a quiet fear that the INFJ remembers everything, including flaws, contradictions, and moments of weakness. Romantically, INFJs are often perceived as paradoxes. They seem warm yet distant, affectionate yet self-contained. Partners may feel deeply understood but also slightly shut out, as though there's an inner chamber the INFJ never fully opens. This can lead to fascination or frustration. Some partners interpret this as emotional withholding, while others sense that the INFJ's inner world is simply too complex to be fully shared. In group settings, INFJs are frequently underestimated. Their quietness is mistaken for passivity, their thoughtfulness for hesitation. People may assume the INFJ is agreeable or easily led until a line is crossed. When that happens, the shift can be shocking. The same INFJ who seemed accommodating suddenly reveals firm boundaries and unshakable convictions. To outsiders, this feels like a plot twist. To the INFJ, it feels inevitable. If you want to truly understand yourself and unlock your full potential as an INFJ, check out the INFJ Master Course today. The link is in the description of this video. There's also a common perception that INFJs are different, though many people struggle to articulate how. They don't chase attention the way others do. They don't seem motivated by status, trends, or shallow validation. This can make them appear detached from the usual social games. Some people admire this quietly. Others resent it, interpreting the INFJ's disinterest as judgment or superiority, even when none is intended. People who don't know INFJs will sometimes label them as intense, strange, or hard to place. There's a sense that INFJs are tuned to a different frequency. They ask questions that go deeper than expected. They steer conversations toward meaning, values, and implications rather than surface facts. For those who prefer lightness and simplicity, this can feel heavy. For those craving depth, it feels like relief. What many don't realize is that INFJs are often mirroring the emotional depth of the people around them. If someone is shallow, the INFJ seems distant. If someone is sincere, the INFJ becomes warm and engaged. This leads to wildly different impressions depending on who you ask. One person may describe an INFJ as cold and aloof, while another swears they are deeply compassionate and emotionally present. Both are telling the truth from their own angle. Another way INFJs are perceived, often without anyone consciously realizing it, is as emotional anchors. In chaotic environments, people instinctively orient themselves toward the INFJ. When tensions rise or conversations turn volatile, INFJs seem to stabilize the atmosphere simply by being present. Others may not credit them for this, but they use it. They vent near INFJs, sit beside them, or seek their reaction before making decisions. Later, the same people might describe INFJs as calm or grounded, without recognizing how much emotional labor that calm required. Some people see INFJs as selectively transparent, which can be confusing. INFJs may speak openly about abstract ideas, philosophies, or even pain in a detached way, yet remain guarded about their personal motivations and vulnerabilities. To outsiders, this feels backward. People expect emotional openness to follow personal disclosure, not precede it. As a result, INFJs are sometimes viewed as evasive, not because they lie, but because they reveal depth without surrendering intimacy. There's also a perception that INFJs are quietly judging. Even when INFJs are being compassionate, their stillness and reflective gaze can make others feel evaluated. This isn't helped by the fact that INFJs tend to pause before responding, choosing words carefully. In a fast-paced social world, that pause is often misread as disapproval or internal criticism. Some people respond by over-explaining themselves, while others become defensive, projecting motives onto the INFJ that aren't actually there. In professional environments, INFJs are often seen as underestimated strategists. At first glance, they may appear too idealistic or people-focused to be effective decision-makers. Over time, however, colleagues begin to notice that INFJs anticipate outcomes others miss. They sense shifts in morale, predict conflicts before they erupt, and understand how decisions will affect human behavior down the line. This can lead to a strange dual reputation, outwardly gentle, inwardly formidable. Another perception INFJs attract is that of being emotionally deep waters. People sense that getting close to an INFJ is not a casual experience. There's an unspoken understanding that connection with them will require honesty, introspection, and change. For emotionally avoidant individuals, this feels threatening. They may distance themselves or label the INFJ as too much, when what they really mean is too real. Some people also see INFJs as internally conflicted. INFJs can hold compassion and boundaries, empathy and distance, hope and realism, all at once. To outsiders who prefer clear, singular identities, this complexity can look like inconsistency. One day the INFJ is warm and engaging. The next they are withdrawn and unreachable. Without understanding the INFJ's need for solitude and recalibration, people may misinterpret this as moodiness or unpredictability. INFJs are often perceived as having a quiet moral compass that doesn't bend easily. They may not preach or argue loudly, but when values are violated, their withdrawal or firm stance speaks volumes. This can surprise people who assume the INFJ would always be accommodating. When an INFJ disengages, others often feel it as a silent verdict, more powerful than confrontation, and sometimes more unsettling. To strangers, INFJs can seem elusive, even slightly unreal. They don't overshare, they don't posture, and they don't chase validation. This gives the impression that they exist on the edge of social life, rather than at its center. Yet paradoxically, they often become central figures in people's inner narratives. The person who listened during a hard time, who said one sentence that lingered for years, who seemed to understand without demanding anything in return. There's also a way people experience INFJs as emotional contradictions that don't resolve neatly. INFJs can be deeply compassionate while refusing to rescue others. To some, this feels confusing or even cruel. People expect kindness to come with constant availability, but INFJs draw invisible lines that are felt more than seen. When they stop showing up, stop responding, or stop engaging, others often feel abandoned without understanding that the INFJ is preserving something essential rather than punishing anyone. Many people sense that INFJs are always slightly ahead of the moment. Conversations with them can feel like speaking to someone who already knows where things are going. INFJs sometimes respond not to what is being said, but to what is about to be said. This can make others feel understood or oddly predictable. Some people find this reassuring. Others find it unsettling, as though their inner script has been quietly read in advance. INFJs are often perceived as emotionally strong in a non-obvious way. They don't harden themselves, don't become cynical, don't broadcast resilience. Yet people notice that INFJs endure things that would harden others and remain soft anyway. This creates a subtle admiration mixed with disbelief. Some people respect it, others mistrust it, assuming there must be suppressed damage beneath the calm. If you want to truly understand yourself and unlock your full potential as an INFJ, check out the INFJ Mastery Course today. The link is in the description of this video. Another perception that follows INFJs is that they're difficult to impress and difficult to manipulate. They may be polite, even agreeable, but there's a sense that shallow charm doesn't reach them. Sales tactics, emotional pressure, or social coercion often fall flat. People who rely on influence games sense this quickly. As a result, INFJs may be left out of manipulative dynamics, or targeted more aggressively by those who feel exposed by their presence. People also notice that INFJs change others without trying to. After interacting with an INFJ, people often find themselves thinking differently, questioning assumptions, or becoming more self-aware. This isn't because the INFJ lectured them. It's because INFJs tend to respond in ways that slow people down. They ask the question that lingers. They reflect back something unspoken. This subtle influence can feel profound in hindsight, even if it went unnoticed in the moment. Some people experience INFJs as emotionally demanding without them ever making demands. Being around an INFJ can raise the emotional standard of the room. Superficiality feels louder. Dishonesty feels heavier. People may feel pressure to be more authentic, more coherent, more real. Those who are comfortable with inner depth appreciate this. Those who aren't may feel exposed and quietly withdraw. There is also a perception that INFJs don't need much from others, which can be both attractive and distancing. They don't cling. They don't beg for attention. They don't collapse when unsupported. To some, this reads as emotional independence. To others, it reads as emotional distance. People sometimes assume INFJs don't need care simply because they don't ask for it, and later are surprised when the INFJ quietly leaves after being chronically unsupported. Another aspect of how INFJs are perceived emerges over time, not in first impressions, but in retrospection. People often don't realize what the INFJ meant to them until the INFJ is gone. Only then do they notice the absence of someone who quietly noticed shifts, checked in without intruding, and held emotional space without demanding performance. The loss feels subtle at first, then oddly disorienting, like removing a stabilizing thread from the background of one's life. Some people experience INFJs as emotionally selective rather than universally warm. INFJs don't distribute their depth evenly. They respond to sincerity with intensity and to pretense with distance. From the outside, this can look like favoritism or inconsistency. One person sees the INFJ as deeply kind and attentive. Another sees them as aloof or uninterested. What's rarely understood is that the INFJ is responding to the quality of presence, not the role or history. INFJs are also often perceived as people who hold back, though not in the way most assume. It's not that they lack opinions or feelings. It's that they sense when sharing them will be wasted, misunderstood, or weaponized. To others, this restraint can feel like emotional superiority or secrecy. In reality, it's discernment. INFJs tend to reveal themselves only where depth is safe, which makes their inner world invisible to many. There's also a quiet intimidation factor that follows INFJs, even when they're kind. People sense that INFJs are difficult to deceive, not because they interrogate or accuse, but because they notice. Small inconsistencies don't go unseen. Emotional incongruence doesn't pass unnoticed. This makes some people unusually careful around INFJs, as if they're afraid of being subtly exposed without a word ever being spoken. People also perceive INFJs as strangely self-directed. They don't always move according to obvious incentives. Praise doesn't energize them the way it does others. Criticism doesn't always deter them either. This can make their motivations hard to predict. Others may feel unsure how to influence or appeal to them, which sometimes leads to frustration or withdrawal. INFJs don't respond to pressure the way most people do. They respond to alignment. Another impression INFJs leave is that they live in a world slightly removed from the present moment. They listen attentively, but their gaze sometimes suggests they're processing something larger than the conversation at hand. People may interpret this as distraction, when it's often synthesis. INFJs are connecting what's happening now to patterns from the past and implications for the future. This gives them a timeless quality that can feel both wise and distant. Some people view INFJs as emotionally expensive, not because they demand care, but because interacting with them feels meaningful rather than casual. There's an unspoken sense that time spent with an INFJ counts. Conversations don't feel disposable. Words linger. For people who prefer light, low-stakes interaction, this can feel heavy. For others, it feels rare and nourishing. INFJs are also perceived as people who don't chase closure. When relationships end, INFJs often leave quietly, without dramatic explanations or public processing. To outsiders, this can seem cold or unresolved. In truth, the INFJ usually found closure internally long before disengaging. They don't need the other person to understand their departure in order to feel at peace with it. INFJs are also seen as internally complete. Even when lonely, even when misunderstood, they carry an air of self-containment. They seem to belong to themselves. This can inspire respect, curiosity, or distance. People may feel unsure how to enter an INFJ's world, sensing that it cannot be accessed casually or conquered socially. People also sense that INFJs are internally disciplined, even when their outer life looks gentle or unstructured. Others may not see strict routines or loud ambition, yet they feel that the INFJ is governed by something firm inside. Values, principles, inner standards, these quietly dictate choices. People often realize this only when trying to push an INFJ off course, and discovering that persuasion simply doesn't work. The INFJ bends socially, but not internally. Some people experience INFJs as emotionally slow, not in intelligence, but in timing. INFJs don't rush emotional conclusions. They don't instantly label others as good or bad, safe or unsafe. This can frustrate people who want immediate reactions or validation. Yet later, those same people may notice that the INFJ's eventual judgment tends to be uncannily accurate. The delay was never uncertainty, it was calibration. INFJs are sometimes perceived as carrying unspoken grief or knowledge. Even when content, there's often a faint undertone of seriousness that others can't quite name. People may project stories onto this, assuming trauma, heartbreak, or hidden suffering. While INFJs do often carry emotional weight, what others sense is not always pain, it is awareness. INFJs tend to see the cost of things, choices, systems, relationships, and that awareness subtly shapes their presence. There is also a perception that INFJs are resistant to social urgency. Trends, outrage cycles, group panic, collective excitement, these sweep past INFJs more slowly. People notice that INFJs don't immediately react the way everyone else does. This can make them seem detached or unbothered, but it often masks a deeper processing style. INFJs tend to ask, what does this mean long term? While others are still reacting to the moment. Some people experience INFJs as emotionally honest, but psychologically private. INFJs can speak sincerely about feelings like sadness, hope, or fear, yet still leave their inner reasoning concealed. This creates a strange imbalance. Others feel they know the INFJ emotionally but not cognitively. It can feel like being close to someone whose internal map you're never quite allowed to see. INFJs are also often perceived as people who notice exits. In relationships, groups, or institutions, INFJs seem aware of when something has crossed a point of no return. Others may still be negotiating, hoping, or denying, while the INFJ has already sensed the structural crack. This doesn't mean they leave immediately, but it does mean their energy shifts. People sometimes feel this shift without understanding it, interpreting it as emotional withdrawal when it is actually foresight. Another subtle perception is that INFJs don't compete in obvious hierarchies. They don't fight for dominance, popularity, or recognition in conventional ways. This can make them invisible in competitive spaces, or strangely threatening. People who rely on status games may feel unsettled by someone who seems unaffected by them. INFJs don't refuse hierarchy loudly. They simply don't orient their identity around it. People also notice that INFJs rarely argue just to win. When INFJs engage seriously, it's usually because something meaningful is at stake. This makes their disagreement feel heavier than most. When an INFJ challenges an idea, it doesn't feel playful or performative. It feels intentional. As a result, others may either deeply respect their perspective or avoid conflict with them altogether. What ultimately shapes how INFJs are seen is not any single trait, but the cumulative effect of interacting with someone who is inwardly anchored and outwardly restrained. For many people, encountering an INFJ feels less like meeting a personality and more like brushing up against a different way of perceiving the world.